In the previous lecture, we were left at a point in which I listed 4 important points that you should remember in order to understand the notion of language as social semiotic in a systemic functional perspective. Now let's see each of them. Functional, which has already been partially explained in the previous chunk of this lecture. And obviously it means that the role of grammar that we give more emphasis to is its contribution to meaning. And actually in systemic functional grammar, the two, grammar, lexicogrammar more correctly, and meaning are inextricable. Secondly, semantic, as you probably remember, means related to meaning. So grammar is considered a resource for making meaning, and this means that there is a relationship of mutual necessity between the two. Right, let's see this example. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Why am I saying that this is not a clause in functional grammar? Well, I'm saying this because you see the clause, or the potential clause that's shown here works well structurally, but it doesn't make sense. Okay, there's no sense in saying that ideas sleep, that ideas are green, and that something green is colorless, and that something that sleeps is furious. There is no sense in that. So I like Chomsky's grammar, which is formal and which is cognitive and structural. Our functional grammar gives priority to meaning. So if a clause is perfectly well formed from the point of view of structure, but it doesn't mean anything, it's not grammatical in functional grammar. It doesn't mean anything. So if there's no meaning, there's no grammar. This is a functional concept, which is not shared by formal grammar. Okay? In formal grammar, this clause, or a so-called clause, or potential clause that you see shown in this slide, colorless green ideas sleep furiously, is a clause for formalists. It is not a clause for functionalists because it doesn't make sense. Right. So if we want to put together semantics and grammar in a diagram, we would have something like this. Something that looks like a circle. Okay? A circle in which you have semantics and lexicogrammar, which in turn construct each other and are constructed in each other. You see, semantics is constructed in lexicogrammar, which in turn constructs semantics, and there is a never-ending relation between the two. So that's why we're representing this relation as a circle. And you see here this quotation, which explains what you've just seen graphically. What functional grammar states is that there is an inextricable relation between grammar and meaning. This is why this slide gives you the example of temporality, and it says how we to understand the semantic category time in different languages unless we explore the grammatical resources that realize it. Okay? So time is obviously a concept in meaning, but in our language you use tense. That's grammatical in order to express it. You couldn't do that in English. You couldn't express time if you didn't have tense. In that sense, meaning and grammar are inextricable in a functional perspective. Okay? And there is no sense in asking if grammar determines meaning or meaning determines grammar, because at some point they have to determine each other and be determined by each other. There is a mutual relationship of necessity between the two. Right, so the third important word is contextual, and as I said before in the previous chunk of this lecture, you should think of context as divided into context of culture and context of situation. And both of these dimensions of context concur to forming the context. Okay, they're both important, they're equally important, and both of them are directly related to language. Okay? So, what the consequence of this is that language does not occur in a vacuum. It is not something that was born out of the blue, right, in emptiness. It's always it's always function in context, okay? The meaning that we make with language is function in context. This is a quotation from Halliday, the founder of functional grammar. So, concerning context, and more specifically the context of situation, there are 3 dimensions to it, and we call these dimensions meta functions. So up to now you've heard me speak a lot about functions, right? The function of language. The function of language being, in the wider sense of the term, communication, okay? Social semiotic. Having a system of signs that will stand for society, that will help us express what we need in order to participate in society. So that's the largest function of language. But there are also meta functions. These are, you could think of them as sort of smaller functions that concur to forming the largest function of language. Okay, and these meta functions are the defining traits of the context of situation. Okay, these dimensions are field, and field is the dimension of context, the meta function that identifies what is going on in a given language situation. So, for example, related to field will be participants, I mean the people, the individuals, and also the things that participate in a given process. The process is also part of the field. And also circumstances. We shall see that all these dimensions of field concur to describe what is going on in a given language situation. Then secondly, we have tenor. Tenor is the dimension of context, the meta function that identifies the relations between the participants. Okay? We'll see that that's the interpersonal dimension of the context. Mode is this third meta function, and the meta function called mode identifies the role of language in a given exchange. So, for example, mode is responsible for whether a piece of language is written or spoken, and it's also responsible for the organization of a text. And by text, you know, we mean both written and spoken language. Okay, we'll see field, tenor, and mode many times throughout this course. So for the time being, you should only know that they exist and have a general idea of what they mean. Okay, field, what's going on; tenor, the relations between the participants; and mode, the role of language. Okay. Now, the fourth and last word that I want you to learn and master is semiotic. Okay, this is the classic example of semiotic. You know, the traffic lights that stand for stop, be careful, or go ahead. Okay, and these meanings correspond to the colors that you see shown in the slide. Okay, so in order for a system of signs to be a semiotic, it has to have a finite set of choices. And these choices have to be discrete. I mean, you have to be able to discriminate among them, to distinguish them, and associate a given meaning, univocal meaning, to each of them. And Finally, the opposition among the signs should be relevant. I mean, it should mean something. The difference in this example between red and green and amber must mean something. Okay, in language, you find the same thing. In vocabulary, for example, vocabulary is finite, isn't it? You have discrete choices, the words, and the opposition among them is relevant. So, okay, remember that language is a social semiotic, a system of science that expresses society and helps us actually make meaning in society. Right, let's have an example. Let's see this clause. Actually, this would be a clause complex, but we'll discuss terminology and refine terminology as we go along. When I got home from my work yesterday, I couldn't believe what my progeny had done. Right? I hope you know all the words. Progeny could be rephrased in different ways. I'm sure you know the meaning of progeny, also because I think most of you are probably native Italian speakers, so it's a word that comes from Latin. Right. So, does it change anything if I replace progeny with one of these other words you see here below in bold, which seem to be, and actually could be considered, as synonyms? Yes, it does, because if you use son or maybe daughter, you add some meaning, the sex of the person we're talking about. If you add darling or brat, you specify attitude. Okay? Right. So you see, every single choice modifies the context and is in turn modified by the context. So choice is vital in an approach to grammar that wants to be functional. Okay? Now let's make another kind of comparison with traditional grammar. You see, this is a page taken from traditional and also actually quite old grammar book. It's Simon Curl's Comprehensive Grammar of English Language, dated 1861. So yeah, it's very old. But actually, if you look at another book of traditional grammar, like for example the one you had in high school, whichever book you had, you'll find that even recent ones look very much the same, because actually their purpose is to provide you with lists and lists of examples that you have to learn by heart in order to be able to form what traditional grammar describes as well-formed clauses. The reason why we don't rely on this model and we favor functional grammar is that we believe that such an account, this list of pronouns, doesn't really tell you anything if it's not set in its context. So that's what we mean by a traditional grammar book does not give insights into the achievement of real-world goals and the solution of real-world problems. Instead, functional grammar aims to do precisely that. It aims to show you how language is purposeful, therefore useful to solve everyday problems and in society, or in communication. This is not an aim of traditional grammar. Okay? Right. So, again, functional grammar, as I said in the previous part of this lecture, may also be considered a grammar of choice, given the fundamental importance of system in this approach to grammar, the fundamental role of the paradigmatic dimension. So, another important thing, another direct consequence of what I just said, is that functional grammar, unlike traditional grammar, is descriptive. It is not prescriptive. And I'm providing this quotation from a book by Martin Matthiasson and Painter, and the book is called Deploying Functional Grammar. If you want, I think it's available in the department library, and it's a good read. But on top of that, it's very useful because it contains a lot of exercises. So if you want to practice, the book Deploying Functional Grammar is a good choice. The reason why I provided this quotation is that I think it's really very explicit about why we've chosen a grammar that's not prescriptive. You see, it's based on empirical research. It's not a prescriptive one which tells you what you can and cannot say, including rules for correcting what are often referred to as grammatical errors. So empirical, you know what empirical means? Empirical means that it's based on real data, which is not the case for most traditional grammar. Traditional grammar is usually based on what are described as idealized examples. Idealized meaning made up, basically. In functional grammar, we analyze real data. I mean, sometimes we do resort to idealized examples too, but most of the time, and our aim is actually to analyze real instances of language. That's what I called before discourse. And finally, a functional grammar is not a grammar of etiquette or a linguistic table manners. Okay, so it doesn't tell you how to use language well. It tells you how language is used in reality and why certain choices are made in certain contexts rather than other choices. Okay, let's see another example. Think about who would say which of the following clauses in what kind of situation to whom. I don't have none, I don't have any. So the first item would be considered by traditional grammarians to be wrong. As I told you before in the previous part of this lecture, we don't like to use labels like wrong and incorrect in functional grammar. We prefer to ask ourselves who would say this to whom and which situation. And this would presumably be an informal spoken situation, yeah, in which double negation is used. It is used. And this is the neutral choice. I don't have any, the one that falls within the realm of standard English. See another example? Okay, the first one is certainly spoken and informal again, but it's also presumably dialectal in the sense that it's typical of particular varieties of English. And you know, in Italian, when you think of the word dialectal, dialettale, for you, it's often a matter of geography. So when you say dialettale, you think of a variety of language that comes from a particular place in your country. Now, in English, of course, yes, we do have geographical varieties, but most of the time, when we say dialectal, we mean something related to the variety spoken by social classes, okay? Because English has social dialects. Okay, for example, the Queen of Great Britain doesn't speak in the same way as people from the working class. Okay, and the example, the first one you have under item 2 is probably working class. Yeah. Instead, in the second line, we have a standard choice. Okay, I've never done anything like that. So the meaning is the same if you want, but the difference is the context in which you would use these two realizations. Other examples, you're coming to the party, aren't you? You're coming to the party, no? Okay, now here the standard one is the first. But what about the second one? Who would use no instead of a tag question? Now, this is typical of users of English as a lingua franca. As you probably remember, I've already mentioned this particular type of English that's used in international contexts as a common currency for people of different nationalities to understand each other. And this is actually typical of lingua franca, deleting the tags and replacing them with something else. And this would be, in functional grammar, a marker of polarity. Polarity, yes or no. And in the in-between lines, and in the in-between shades between these two poles. Okay? To whom did you speak? Who did you speak to? Now, probably from your traditional grammar studies in high school, you'll be tempted to think that these two are the same. Because, as I told you before, for traditional grammar, what counts is for the statements, for the clauses to be grammatically well formed. In functional grammar, this is only part of the problem, okay? The other part of the problem, which is as important as being well formed, is the context in which you would use a given clause and favor it over another. That means the same, like this. Now the first one is more formal, okay? It means you use it when there is a high or a medium high degree of social distance between you and your interlocutor. The second one is informal, and actually it's the standard choice. It's the most widespread. Who did you speak to? Okay? Finally, it was I, it was me. This also provides another interesting comparison with functional grammar, because in most traditional grammar books, you'll find that the first one, it was I, is favored. Well, actually, in functional grammar, the second one is favored, even if, okay, as I said, we don't consider the first one to be wrong. We accept both of them because our aim is not to judge the table manners of speakers. Our aim is to describe how speakers speak. So both are used, but the reason why we favor the second one is that it's more widespread. So most speakers would use the second one rather than the first, and that makes it standard for us. Right, some more examples. What's the difference between good morning sir, good morning madam, hi, hello, hi there, hi man, hi you guys, hey dude, what's up, are you doing? There are ways of saying hello, okay? This is for sure. But, okay, good morning is very neutral. Good morning, sir or madam, obviously adds some information. It adds the information related to the gender of our interlocutor, but it's also more formal than the first one, okay? Hi is informal as well. Hello is informal too. Do you know the difference between hi and hello? Well, there is a slight difference, even if today, with globalization, it's been a bit blunted, but hi is more international than hello, which tends to be more widely used by British speakers. So hi, for example, tended to be associated in the past with American English, but it's also used by British speakers as well. Hi there is more informal than just hi. Hi man addresses a male person, and it's as informal as hi there. Hi you guys would qualify the speaker as American, because guys, as well, especially as a vocative, is not widely used in varieties of English outside the United States. Hey dude is the opposite. It would qualify you as European, as British. What's up? That's informal, very informal, like the Italian come va, yeah? And how you doing is more or less the same. It's informal as well. But you see, each of these is a different way of saying hello. They're synonyms, but the context for each of them changes slightly. And that slight change adds a shaded meaning to the grammar of the hello that we're saying. Now, he kicked the bucket. Do you know this idiomatic expression? Okay, it means to die, okay? But you see how many ways there are to say that. He died, neutral, passed away, euphemistic, understatement, left us, has gone to meet his maker. These are all euphemisms, okay? Ways of softening the impact of what you're saying. Has gone to a better place, was taken from us much too early, much too soon, and these are usually used when a young person dies. Now, bit the dust is a bit more, it's a bit stronger, it's a bit, I mean, I'd like you to know it, but I wouldn't like you to use it, you know, it's a bit blunt to say that. Is sleeping with the angels, that's also a euphemism used when someone young dies. Shuffled off his mortal coil, that's very poetic. Okay, and the other two, bought the farm and pushing up daisies, are decidedly ironical. So just like bit the dust, yeah, I encourage you to know them, but not to use them in your real practice of language. But you see how many ways there are of saying die. And each has a differentiated meaning, okay? And this is an instance of what would be described in linguistics as semantic specialization. Semantic specialization is when you have many expressions, a big variety of expressions to express, to describe the same concept. In this case, death, okay? And it's a way that languages have to express a concept that's that's considered important. Okay, let's go on. Right. So I hope you understood that the approach that functional grammar has to the description of language is not aimed to find mistakes. Its aim is to describe the meaning of language in context, and to provide reasons why certain choices are made depending on context. So as I said, there's a mutual relation between context and grammar. You can't really ask which comes first. Okay, they're both equally important. So ours is a grammar that respects the speaker's rights to make up their own mind about how they choose to talk. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that you can structure your statements as you like, okay? There always must be a reason, and that reason must be plausible within the language of you speaking. There must always be a reason why you made a certain choice, okay? Secondly, functional grammar makes speakers explicitly aware of the choices they have available so that they can make an informed decision about the options they choose. So what we hope that functional grammar will give you is a whole array of tools in order for you to choose how to speak, in order for you to master different registers in the English language and be able to choose the right one depending on the situation you're involved in. So, okay, this is the end of the second part of the first lecture. So I recommend you study it and then you go on to the next section.